Hey everybody, welcome to week 2. So you got it through that first week, you got through the introduction. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the class. So this week, there's a bunch of different things that you're going to be working on. We're going to be focusing primarily on hardware and software, computer hardware and computer software. So make sure that you go through that lecture, and the lecture is very user-friendly. They have these little kind of stopping points where it asks you some questions just to kind of make sure that you're kind of keeping up with the information. But make sure you go through that. And then also make sure that you get into the discussion board. So this week, as I mentioned in one of my announcements last week, this week is the first long-term, full week discussion board. And so we're going to be following the rubric. I did attach a copy of it for you, so if you couldn't find it on Blackboard, it is there. And the topic for this week is fascinating, and I'm going to have another video within the discussion board itself, so I always post my own thread, and I'll have a video there as well explaining a little bit more. But this is on the subject of slacktivism, which you may not have heard before, but it's what's called a portmanteau. It's two words, slacker and activism, combined together. I was talking about a couple specific instances, I think one specific instance where slacktivism seemed to have occurred. And really what we're trying to do in this discussion board is ask what you think about it. Are we basically kind of slackers, if you will, kind of lazy because of our technology, because of our ability to communicate instantaneously? Does that make us lazier? Does that make us lazy thinkers? Does that make us lazy activists? So I'm actually very much looking forward to this discussion board. I really hope that you really just jump in with both feet and get a lot out of it. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing. We've got two other assignments. We've got a small assessment, a small quiz about hardware that you're going to be working on. Shouldn't be too complex, but again, make sure that you're going through the entire thing before you hit submit. Then we also have a reflection. And the reflection is going to be on the subject of OneDrive. So I want to spend a little bit of time in this video, just a couple minutes, and talk about OneDrive. And if you don't know what OneDrive is, hopefully you'll get a bit of an understanding here and from the lecture notes as well. So in order to understand OneDrive, we first need to talk about cloud technology. Now, in order to understand cloud technology, we have to have some sort of understanding of what the internet itself is. So what is the internet? This is something we use all the time, every single day. So much of our lives are focused, for good or for bad, on the internet. Well, what is it? Well, the internet, as you can kind of guess from the term itself, is just interconnected networks throughout the world. So you're on a network right now. You're probably at home on your local area network. This is where you have a modem and you have a router, and that allows you to get internet connection wherever you go in your house. That is a network. That's what you're able to link to other networks or interconnect with other networks, which makes up the internet. When you go into one of our school campuses, or you go to Starbucks, or you go to the grocery store, or you go to the library or your church or wherever, most places now have their own networks, wireless networks usually. And these are all connected together, millions and millions and millions and millions of them around the world that makes up the internet. Now, the internet itself is kind of that hardware, that structure that allows us to have web pages and other kinds of things on top of it. So the internet itself is really just it's cable, it's cell towers, it's routing stations, it's modems and routers and everything. It's the hardware. We talk about hardware and software. This is the real hardware that makes up the internet. And it's fascinating to think about. Stop and think about this for a minute. There are tens of thousands of miles of cable all over the world running under the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean that help basically allow the internet to work. And I mean that, tens of thousands of miles of cable. And there's satellites, and there's towers, and all sorts of stuff that makes up the internet. Now, it's because of this that my network can connect with your network, or if you're watching YouTube, your network that you're on right now can go and essentially speak to YouTube's network and allow you to watch videos of all sorts of different kinds of things, right? And then we do that through a certain kind of software tool called a browser, and we'll talk more about browsers down the road. But that is the internet. Now, what is cloud technology? Well, the internet is what it is, and the web kind of sits on the internet. Now, we realize that so much of what we do on the web, when we're searching, when we're buying, when we're saving stuff, we no longer have to do what we did maybe even 5-10 years ago and save all this stuff on the little flash drives or onto CD-ROMs or on external hard drives or anything like that. We used to do that, but we don't anymore. That's because of cloud technology. So stop and think about this for a minute. Two examples. One would be iTunes. Now, how many of you remember, not that long ago, how many of you remember buying, an album or buying a single song on iTunes and then downloading it to your hard drive, to your computer, right? It wasn't that long ago, but now we don't do that. Why? Because we have iCloud. We whatever we buy is stored automatically, and then you can have it on your phone or you can have it on some other kind of device, but it's stored there. It's stored in the cloud. Now, think about Netflix for a minute. Everybody knows Netflix, right? So you have this giant queue of tons and tons of movies or TV shows or something in Netflix. Now, you don't store all those things onto your computer, right? They're in the cloud. So you go on you log in and you go into your queue and you say, I want to watch blah, 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 whatever. And you start watching it. That is streamed from the internet because that is saved in the cloud. So it's not out there in the cloud, stuff that you're storing. It's not out there in the ether somewhere floating around. Essentially, these are things that are stored on those other companies' computers. So they have servers, these massive computers, and they're storing your data there. Now, there's good and there's bad because of this. And the lecture has a video, a really good video by CNBC, that goes into a little bit more detail about what might be some of the pros and cons of cloud technology. But that is cloud technology. Now, Google does this, Amazon does this, Facebook does this. This is all cloud-based. You're not saving anything onto your hard drive. Frankly, you're not downloading anything other than maybe a little icon that's a link to get to the cloud much easier and much more efficiently. So this is cloud technology. Now, for us in this class, because we use Microsoft 360, Office 365, and you all have access to this. You have access to a key element of cloud storage, which is called OneDrive. So this is Microsoft's storage, online storage, and you can store anything in OneDrive. I use OneDrive all the time. Now, Google has their own Google Drive, and we talk a little bit about that in the lecture notes as well, and that's kind of a competing version, all right? So, but both of them are doing the same thing. They're allowing you to store information in the cloud. Basically, OneDrive is letting you store information on computers that Microsoft owns in these massive server farms somewhere, in the West Coast somewhere that's the size of multiple football fields. It's climate controlled. It's really very, very nice and very, very secure. Now, that's what you're going to be talking about in this week's reflection, is your reflections on OneDrive, okay? And in the video, in the different lecture notes and the videos in there, it does talk about other aspects of cloud technology. It'll talk about the different programs, the different applications in Microsoft 365. It will talk about OneDrive. It will talk about Google Drive and Google Docs. And these are other things you might be familiar with, but they're kind of competitors to Microsoft. And so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit down the road as well. So that just gives you a very, very brief understanding of what cloud technology is and how it requires an understanding of what the internet very generally is. And so hopefully you have a bit more of an understanding there. Now, watch the video in this week's discussion board that kind of help you kind of get started in this week's discussion, and look forward to more videos down the road. I don't know if I'll do any more in week 2, but I'll definitely be doing a lot more throughout the coming weeks. Thanks, folks.